So it's my
Absolutely.
pleasure to now introduce Alex Holmes from the University of Leeds. And her talk is about creating change makers, inclusive and community inspired education for sustainable development. Alex, over to you when you're ready.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm Alex. I'm actually really pleased to be going second because so much of the context that I wanted to set for this has already been set. So absolutely brilliant. Um, I'm a lecturer in pharmacology based at the University of Leeds in the School of Biomedical Sciences. And I just want to start my talk with a quote from the previous talk, which is that we're not here to become biomedical scientists. This is absolutely the approach that we're taking in the School of Biomedical Sciences. We're interested in creating change makers, so students that at the end of their degrees are equipped with the experiences, the competencies to go out and actually make change in their communities, in their jobs, maybe through enterprise. And so, as part of that, we're doing inclusive and community inspired education for sustainable development that I'm going to talk to you about here. And the decolonisation approach that we've taken at a school level for our students interacting with other students, at a local level in Yorkshire, and then also on a more global level. To give you some context, the University of Leeds is currently going through our curriculum review. We've redefined our first year, and that's run for the first time. And in October, our new second year begins for the first time. I'm going to tell you about two modules I run that have functionally replaced our academic skills modules. So, this is my favorite picture, but it's also a little bit messy if you don't understand it yet. So the way that we've been doing our transferable skills education is we're really focusing in on surfacing skills. And my modules, because these are the academic skills modules, kind of take this identifying skills, signposting them to students, but also giving the students time to practice the skills, assessing them authentically, and the space to reflect on the skills they're developing. And my modules cover all of these domains from academic, digital, sustainable, enterprise, technical, and work ready. And our two real key aims for this is student preparation. So students, when they graduate, they're ready to go out, whether that's into work, into policy, into enterprise, into the NHS, wherever it might be. But also students that are ready for higher education. So understanding kind of the hidden curriculum, making clear the different processes, different assessments they might have to do, and hopefully combat some of our awarding gaps through doing that. The other bit I'm particularly interested in is this student perception aspect. In biosciences, our students are really good at identifying why the technical skills matter, why they should be able to prepare and use equipment, very good at acknowledging that the content is useful for them. But all those transferable skills, they're less good at identifying that they're able to do and articulating when they've done them, but also appreciating the value of them. So those are the places where I'm interested in this. And also those skills like cultural awareness, ethics, that our students don't necessarily see throughout their degree programs, but are definitely there and embedded. So instead of our old model of skills education, where we would have a lecture on how to write an essay, and then at some point in the future, our students would write an essay, instead, we're having our students work on projects. What that looks like is this. We've identified our 10 real key skills that we want our students to develop, and these will align then to project activities. So, for instance, informed literature searching, critical reading, that aligns to topic selection, project planning, our information collection, and our information analysis and evaluation. And all our project activities, our students work through together as teams. So they're set up into teams, they establish learning contracts, their terms of reference, they have project leaders, they're given the opportunity to change teams. They also move through topic selection, stakeholder analysis, project planning, information collection. So we have ethics for some of our students to do primary data collection. So we have to do particular work there around if you're working with members of the community. Information analysis. My poor first year students had to respond to an unexpected event. They were all very unhappy when I prioritised the NHS midway through their projects. And they also then form recommendations, and I'll talk to you a bit about the criteria we use to assess those recommendations and present them to the rest of their classes. And all of these feed into our project-based assessments. And then we also have some individual assessments that use some of our other skills. And these are they're creating e-portfolios, so they're things that they can then show off afterwards and really showcase the project to the best of their abilities and the way that they feel is the most beneficial. And we can kind of take them with where they want to present things. If they don't want to talk to camera in a video, they can create a Prezi. If they do want to talk to camera and think they can best express themselves in their own words rather than writing, we absolutely accept that as well. So I told you it was team-based, and this is the kind of start of our encouraging our students to bring their lived experiences into their degree programs and valuing each other's lived experiences. So we have about 240 students in each of our years. I've got the demographics here. So majority are female, about 30% of them are male. 1 in 5 of them have done an extended project qualification beforehand, and that's important to mention because they're doing extended projects through this module, making sure that we can disperse these students throughout the teams. They're not getting an advantage over other students, and they can help other students with their expertise. Slightly less of our students have their primary residencies overseas, about 12%, and a similar number have gone through our Access to Leeds scheme, which is our widening participation scheme, where we identify students in low participation neighbourhoods, different socioeconomic statuses, and we provide them with additional support. So we've made our teams purposely diverse. Pretty much all of our teams look like this. And we spend a lot of time at the beginning talking about how we care about what each member brings to a team, how different lived experiences, different ways of living, different cultures really are important for this. And we focus in on our cultural awareness training for our students interacting with other students, but also when we look at our wider community. Because we know that there are going to be hierarchies, there's going to be power imbalances, and we want to remove that as much as possible. We've got a couple of different team working strategies we've used. So student-made learning contracts and a problem-solving strategy. So it's really explicit for everybody what the rules are, what the expectations are, but they can agree them amongst themselves. What is success for us, rather than me turning up and saying, well, this is what success looks like from my own perspectives, letting them agree that amongst themselves. We have timetable sessions, so they are supported. There's academics in those that can check in, make sure if there's any tensions in groups that we can resolve them. And then also we have explicitly taught the students how to work in teams, which has been really crucial for allowing them to actually do this well. What that looks like in terms of the ways our students responded to this is I've got 3 quotes here talking about the benefits that they've seen from the team working. So identifying that their project was actually really well constructed, and that's because they worked in a group. Enjoying with working people in a team and bringing the best out of each other. And also, this I really love, is that integration of different viewpoints led to a more well-rounded project. So that really identifying where those different cultural competencies are important. We've done some student surveys here. This is from, 97 students in their first year. And the vast majority of them strongly agree or mostly agree that their course is supportive of diversity, which is really nice to see. And for this statement, students of my course value me as a person. In the red is before the introduction of this module, and in blue is following the introduction of this module. And we are seeing there is an increase in the number that strongly agree with the statements. The majority still mostly agree, and we've had a move away from that mostly disagree, which is just such a brilliant thing to be seeing, that our students are really seeing the value of each other and feeling that they're being valued by each other, regardless of their background. This is the bit I'm particularly proud of. We know students don't like team working, and when asked how they respond to the statement, I prefer to work in a team rather than individually. In the light blue prior to my module, vast majority of the students, as you probably imagine, strongly disagree with that statement. And there are a couple saying strongly agree, but looking at the data, it looks like those are misclicks rather than people actually feeling that way. This year, we've had a shift to people neither agreeing nor disagreeing, which I'm so pleased with, that our students actually don't feel like they're potentially disadvantaged by working in teams, but they don't necessarily feel like they could do the work better on their own. They feel like they are happy where they are, and they're not having to deal with conflicts and things like this in their teams in the same way. So this, I'm very proud of. So I've talked to you a lot about the team setup. What are they actually doing? So this is moving away from the ways that we've set up our decolonisation practices and kind of our cultural awareness in the school, and more going into the local area. So we work on local challenges, which is just global challenges on a local level. It just needed a fancy name. We're looking particularly at healthy ageing and in Yorkshire. And the reason for that is that Leeds has recently released its ambition to become the best city in the UK. So everyone look out for that when it happens. But one of their main pillars for this is healthy ageing. And that really nicely unites biomedical sciences, but also some of these more like policy driven changes. Leeds is a really cool case study for this. We've got 75 different ethnic groups, and I think like 100 different languages are spoke within the city. 1 in 6 of the population is disabled, and 1 in 4 of the population lived in an area ranked amongst the most deprived in the UK. And this picture here, so Leeds city centre is the kind of lighter green blob amongst all of that dark blue. So we've got something that's called a donut of deprivation, and the students see that when they're in the city, and they can kind of see when they move between student areas and into other areas of the city. You can tell that the deprivation indexes change. So really giving them that context about the city that they're currently living in. And it also helps us address some of the stereotypes people get, particularly a lot of them that have moved to the north for the first time. It might be particularly looking at health challenges. Oh, well, lots of people used to work in the mines, so cancer is higher. Oh, because like the industrialization changes that happened, people are more likely to be on benefits, unemployed. We've got a lower level of healthcare. We can actually address some of those misconceptions or address the fact that those aren't working for community statements. Those are coming in and saying, okay, I'm potentially from the south. I know how we can fix these changes because I've seen how it's done where I live. And that not being the circumstance in Yorkshire. What the students have actually worked on. So this is a snapshot of some of their final outputs, their project portfolios. And you can see there's a wide range of different projects here. We've got dementia in Yorkshire. We have a really high rate of dementia in Yorkshire, but they found that potentially that's because we have better screening mechanisms. So things other places can learn from Yorkshire. Teenage pregnancy. So they looked at how in certain cultures in Yorkshire, actually teenage pregnancy isn't this stigmatized Western ideal. We've got sports participation, and this group looked not just at the benefits of doing sports participation, but also, because we're a very university student heavy city, some of the dangers about being involved in sports societies. We've got arthritis, we've got healthy aging of students with Down syndromes, the population with Down syndrome. We've got an increase in vaping project and also meningitis in university students. So a really vast array of projects here. And because we're asking them to come up with recommendations, I've just got a couple snapshots here. So the meningitis group found that the university didn't have a single web page or informational piece around meningitis and why university students might be at risk, or the fact that students up until the age of 25 can get vaccinations on the NHS. And they were looking at this cultural awareness. What about students coming from places where they haven't had access to free health services before? What about students coming from a family that's potentially anti-vax or is worried about these kinds of things? What about a family or a circumstance where previously kind of medical interventions have been not great, they've not been listened to by doctors? How do we make our informational package for students accessible in those ways? We've got a screening tool for Alzheimer's in the middle, a mock-up of a website that carers could use to identify changes, but also information for them when there's kind of stigma or the idea that maybe Alzheimer's isn't a real thing. Financial barriers to sport, and some of these are actually being taken forward to the union tomorrow by me to suggest some of these changes that our students have created. So real world solutions to some of these. And then also policy changes, potential rules about what the flavours and packaging can be used for vapes to try and reduce the number of people that are vaping. Just so you know that this isn't just a subset of student groups that I've picked out that were fantastic, I have done analysis of all the solutions across 6 different measures. And we've got really feasible projects, really impactful recommendations, and incredibly evidence-based ones, which is really fantastic. We're not quite there yet on the culturally aware, innovative, and creative aspects, but just to reiterate, these are first-year students. So I think the fact that we are having quite a few of the projects, at least midway, kind of considering cultural awareness in their recommendations, is a really huge step that we're having here, particularly after they've kind of worked together in these ways. And also for their individual skill development, we are seeing massive increases, particularly in things like information and literature searching, reading scientific texts. So this is in the light green, student confidence at the beginning of the year, dark green, student confidence midway through the year. And although they're not significant, there are definitely changes in students' confidence and their cultural awareness and ethical awareness. And I think that's a really nice thing that we're starting to see, and hopefully will come out more in the future years working on these projects. So this is the module that's going to start in October with our second year students, the students that have just gone through this first year. And this is where we're starting really in depth going into our decolonisation practice. So we're going to look at global challenges. The UN Sustainable Development Goals are going to be the basis of the problems the students are going to work on. We're biomedical sciences, so obviously number 3, good health and well-being. We've also got global partners, so also partnership for the goals. We've got partners in Nigeria, South Africa, and Japan, once I get the memorandum of understanding written and sent over. But we're really, really going to focus on this learning from the global south and the global north. And a bit like was mentioned earlier, that kind of access to healthcare, case studies from different places, clinical trial use, ethics around animals, even. We're really going to focus on how we can learn from processes in the global south and apply those to the global north, as well as taking things from the global north to the global south. Some of our students are going to work in international teams in their first semester with our partner universities so they can share their experiences back and forth and co-create case studies like internationally, which I'm really excited about. And then second semester, we're going to work in much larger teams, about 20, with sub-teams to kind of form departments that are going to work on specific themes around enterprise education policy, because these are such key places to have these conversations about access, the power structures, our kind of understanding of our understanding and where knowledge comes from. So this is what it looks like in a little bit more detail, because I'm aware it sounds a bit fluffy sometimes when I talk about it, but these are all the weeks of semester 1 across the top. In blue, we've got our lectures. In grey, we've got our workshops where the students practice their skills. And then in green, we've got our scheduled sessions where the students actually work on their projects in teams. And it might not jump out immediately where we're embedding our decolonisation practices, but I have highlighted them in yellow. So almost every week we have a session where decolonisation or our understanding of Western structures or our understanding of how we reference people or acknowledge people for their contributions or where we get our information comes from is going to be highlighted in these. So really embedding it from the beginning. And we are also recognising that in the solutions that they come to. So in the first year, the mark scheme included that we want to see that they're being culturally aware that they're considering their stakeholders. And that's going to be the exact same in the second year as well. So I thought I'd finish with my top tips, because I'm very aware that not everyone can just create 2 20-credit compulsory modules for all their students in a school. How do you, where's the gap in between those two things? And these are the things that from my last year and a bit working on this that I'd really recommend. So looking at team working, just teaching team working strategies to the students, explaining to them the different models and how that might work for different people in different contexts, and also teaching cultural awareness when students work in teams. Not everyone can on a Friday night meet to go through their project. Not everybody can meet on a Saturday morning to go do these things. Also providing clear problem solving strategies so everyone's on the same page and there's access to these across all the modules. They're not turning up to a different course and getting different information. And also just making very clear the rationale for team working. So I say to my students, I really want you to bring your experience to this. I want you to bring the information you have, the culture you come from into this. And I've given you too much work to do individually. You can, and I will give you an adjusted mark scheme and things like that if you have reasonable adjustments, but try. Let's see if we can work through this, and I'll support them with it. With the student projects, before we started, we were really worried that students wouldn't come up with appropriate projects. That was not an issue. Every single student had ideas about what they wanted to do, and all of them chose really interesting projects that they were excited to work on. They were given guidance, but it was really nice seeing their ideas and their interests coming through there. We got really high student investment as well. We were over 75% attendance at every session, and that's because they got to choose their own projects and work on things they were excited about. The community inspired work could be done on a much smaller scale, so maybe 1 or 2 workshops or lectures where you kind of introduce the students to the idea, give them time to go research these things, and then work together to form recommendations and check them against different criteria. And if you are thinking about changing your assessments, authentic but externally visible assessment I think is really key. So my first year students are about to go into their second year. A lot of them want to do years in industry, and having this as kind of a record of their skill development, but also real world projects that they've worked on, is such a nice thing for them to have. And we know there are gaps around what demographics of students do years in industry And we know that that then leads to awarding gaps. So providing that for all of our students and really encouraging them to use it, I think is really benefiting them. So I've told you about what we're doing and our kind of processes at a student and school level, the local level, and our global level, which is coming in October. I just want to mention some of the ongoing work. So I've got 2 student interns over the summer who are fantastic. One of them is currently analysing our awarding gaps within the module itself, and because we have peer feedback as well, they're also analysing that. Another student's doing thematic analysis of how students have articulated their skills and their skill development. And we're also doing a project around identifying what barriers there are to this skill development and articulation. So thank you so much for listening to me. I'm really excited to see all your comments and questions.
Thank you, Alex. That was excellent. Really love the approach you've taken, and certainly
Thank you.
recognise that work that must take to organise a module of that. But I'll pass straight over to the question master.
Lovely.
All right. Hi, Alex.
Hiya.
Lovely talk. Thank you very much. We've had a selection of questions for you, which is lovely. So another Alex says, thank you, Alex. This is all very meta. Can you suggest any materials for the team working strategies / models you indicated in the tips and quick wins?
Absolutely. So in terms of the team working strategies, we teach collaborative and cooperative and design thinking team working strategies. So this collaborative is where you're kind of all talking together and collaborating. We kind of teach them rules to do with this, so it can't be that you have to leave the silence for everyone to then think and then talk, but also cooperative where people have the time to kind of go away, have their own tasks, and then come back and discuss. So you're all working together, but you're cooperating. You're not having to talk the whole time together. And design thinking, it really goes to this like diverge, converge. So I could say to all of you, okay, we're going to look at Sustainable Development Goal 3. Everyone is going to go away for 5 minutes and thinking about what the biggest challenge in that is that they're excited about. And then we'd all come together after you've done that to actually all not fight it out over which one we think is most important, but then do the discussions. Some resources, I'd really recommend looking at somewhere called unihelper.io. They have example learning contracts, they have like conflict negotiation strategies, all of those kind of things, which is really a rich text. I'm really happy to share that link as well.
Please do, Alex. That leads on to one of the other questions, and it was one of the comments as well, and it was about the student-made learning contracts and the code of conduct that they came up with, which sound excellent because the students have created. What was actually the content of them? What sort of things are they putting into those self-made learning contracts, into their own code of conduct? What are they saying?
That's a really good question. So some of them have taken it very seriously, and it reads almost like a lawyer has drafted it. And it's kind of, we all agree that we're going to attend at minimum an hour of each session, and we're going to work on these things. And kind of, a lot of them are focused in on problem solving. So what happens if somebody in the team doesn't attend? What happens if somebody in the team is ill for some reason? What happens if we're not getting on, if we're not able to resolve a conflict? What happens if we have to make a decision but people aren't available to help with that? And then also there's agreeing kind of what they want to do for success. So some of them have explicitly written, we want to achieve a 2-1 in this or higher, or we want to have a focus on this and come up with 3 recommendations. And others have kind of said we want to have a good time and get on. A couple of them have put in punishments as well. So I've read a couple where it's kind of, they calculated the amount of money they were spending per hour of the sessions from their like student fees, and it kind of, bear in mind, you will owe us this much money at the end if you miss it. So did not encourage that, but a couple of students went down that route. Or when we next go out for coffee, you have to buy us all a coffee as your forfeit, those kind of things. Yeah. But I have some examples I can share if people are really interested.
I think that'd be amazing. I think we could use those at just working in general. That'd be
very
well down in the departments. So leading on from that, Neil Pickles asked a question. It says, actually I have to use my pen to read the words. A common concern from students is how group work is assessed. The talk covered how students feel more valued in teamwork, which is great. What has been their view on the output and how it is assessed?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I didn't show that data, but actually we did survey the students about this, and the majority of students feel that they perform well in group work,
Mhm.
um, which is really nice. It shows that they're not feeling disadvantaged. We do have issues where students feel like they did the majority of the work, so it's not fair that other people in the team would get marks for it. So I'm doing a larger piece of work in the faculty that I'm in to look at all of the ways that we assess group work and how we moderate grades as well. What we currently do for these modules is they fill out this like peer evaluation thing, and it asks kind of, do students respond to messages in a timely manner? Have they contributed to the success of the project? And they rate each other, but they also rate themselves in this. And I then cross-check it against all the attendance monitoring data, and if I know there's disabilities that have to be taken into account, those kind of things. But that then means that for some students, their grade has increased by 5 marks, and other people have decreased by
Mhm.
5 marks in their team. And that's actually resolved the majority of the issues. All students have felt like that's fair, and I've not had anybody come to me saying, "Oh, I think I was marked down by my team," or "and that wasn't fair," or "Oh, I think I was marked up by my team and I feel weird about that." It also meant groups where we thought there were 5 at the beginning of the year, and then it turns out there was actually only 3 or 4. We could boost their grade slightly because they'd done slightly more work than if it had been a team of 6.
Yeah.
But we are doing some more work around that as well.
Fantastic. From the commentary and a question that came in the back channel, and then also my own sort of looking into how group formation actually occurs within student populations. When the groups are forming, are you selecting the groups? Are they student defined? Do you find we published a piece of work 6 or 7 years ago that we found that students of similar backgrounds would cluster together? What's happening in your context? How are your groups forming?
That's a really good question. And I read that paper and thought it was really interesting, actually, that kind of you can predict how people might do based on where they're sitting. I thought that was so interesting. So in the first year, because we're literally putting them into teams week 1, there's not that time for them to get to know each other. Again, you could get that clustering that we don't really necessarily want. What we do is we look at all the data we have upon their entry
Mhm.
and put them into tutor groups based on this. So first semester, all the pharmacologists are with pharmacologists, and we have some control over who we put with which academic tutor, and that automatically puts them into kind of teams of 5 to 6 students. And we do it based on A-level grades or alternative grades. We do it based on date of birth, their ethnicity, country of origin, whether or not they've done an extended project qualification, as many different factors as we can to try and get these teams as diverse as possible. In the second semester, though, in the first year, we give the students the opportunity to change teams. So we do, this was the absolute bane of my life when I did it, but a mass speed dating event where all the students go talk to all the other student groups and they kind of pitch their project ideas to each other. And they then apply, every student has to apply to at least 3 teams they'd be interested in joining. And every team has to say, these are the kind of students we'd like to join us. So we're in neuroscience teams looking at brain injury. We'd really like some sports and exercise scientists to join us because they might have insights around motor control and things like that. And that actually worked really nicely because it meant students were able to say, okay, well, I'm actually more interested in this topic area now. It also meant they could flag to me, okay, I want to change teams, but that's because of the team working in this particular group. In the second year, I'm like unihelper.io. They also have a service where they can put students into teams for you. So they send out a questionnaire to all your students and they ask them a couple of questions around kind of what are your working practices? Do you have anything that would mean that we need to put you in groups with certain people? But then ask them a load of personality questions and
Mhm.
then puts people into groups based on this. So I'm really excited about that. I really hope that works nicely, but they've seen it kind of reduces the amount of like tension in student groups because they've had a role in choosing who they're with without having to say to their friend, like, oh, I don't want to work with you, sorry.
Yeah, sometimes getting away from your friends is the hard part.
Exactly.
Excellent. Right, I've got one more question from the chat. So just a plug. If anybody wants to ask another question, now's the time to start typing or think about raising your hand. The final one that came to the chat is if a student has a reasonable adjustment and are unable to complete the group project, what alternative assessments have you found effective to allow the students to still achieve the learning outcomes? What's
That's
your
a really
alt?
good question. So we say to the students, because all the assessments are just assessing the project outcomes, and we allow them to do a project on their own if they want to. They still have to meet the same criteria, create recommendations and things. But we've not actually had that happen. So we have 4 students with group work adjustments on the module, and 2 of them are in that agree that they prefer to work in teams rather than individually column on my graph. And the another one of them has explicitly given me feedback that they are so pleased they worked in a group and they found it great. So no students have actually taken me up on that, but it would just be a modified assessment where they do the same process, still meet the learning outcomes, they just be producing a slightly smaller piece of work to reflect the fact that it's an individual piece of work.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alex. It's a really good approach and a good idea there.
Thank you.
Jeffrey has raised his hand. Hello, Jeffrey.
Hello, thank you. I was interested in you saying you're doing some work on this question about group work and whether people feel that they've had the right mark and whether their contribution was acknowledged. Have you looked at approaches like journaling, where the students keep a record of their workshop discussions and so on a shared drive? And then the student should then use that as evidence to say, look, this was the contribution each person made. You have to be a bit careful about that, because sometimes you might not write very much, and yet your contribution might have been a very profound thing. It might really have changed the direction of the project. But if you gave that, particularly to the second year students, I think, as a task they had to do, refer to this thing on OneDrive or on OneNote, which, if you like, was the evidence of the growing project, a kind of narrative of everything they'd done and the sources they'd used, that might be perhaps one contributor to the group mark, even if you didn't use that for the whole assessment.
That is actually something we're going to do in the second year. So actually, thank you for mentioning that, because I had not, and I'm really pleased that I get to now. So alongside these, they write reflective essays and reflective pieces of work. And as part of that, we get them to keep a log of what they've been doing and kind of prompt them to do reflection around the ways they feel that they've contributed. So even if they've not written lots, they could say, oh, I was really proud of that profound contribution that I made today. Or other people might say, oh, it was great, like Jeffrey said this thing today and it actually made me think about all these other things. We've not used it as kind of evidence for this yet, but it does lead up to their capstone where they do get an execution mark, and part of that is keeping an up-to-date log of what they've been doing and the way they're feeling about what they're doing and things like that. So we're going to kind of highlight the importance of it and why it leads into their third year and their reflective essays. We'll see whether or not we use it to conflict manage students around their grades, but that is a really good suggestion. Thank you.